Hey guys, it's Kate, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about the underrated and lowly sponge. So, I have here a couple of natural sponges that are sold in the art section at the store. It is one of many different kinds of sponges you can get, but this is the one I'll be working with today. I haven't been using these in my videos, and I probably should because they're kind of wonderful. So this actually was attached before, and you can keep it big like this. And you can buy them in these multi-packs with different sizes, but they also tear easily. And I'll just kind of show you, if you wanted to tear a piece off just to use in a project, you could. You can tear it all to pieces. And if you look closely, you have some ends that are very fuzzy and loose, and they're kind of they meet at the end in almost like a little brush or something. And then you have these more substantial sides that are pretty flat, but they're holy. And so you can get some really cool textures with these depending on how you use them. So we're going to do a couple of different uses today. So first, I'm going to go over one easy way to use them, and that is you can wet down your paper with them instead of using your brush, and you can get an even coat. And I'm not going to do that here because I'm going to start, you know what, actually, let's do it here. I'm going to do a quick dip in my little jar of water I have back here, and I've got a pretty good amount of water. Now I'm just going to rub it on my page and get it good and saturated. And you don't have that, at least I don't think you have that, you know how when you lift your brush from a page and it leaves a drop of water behind, kind of just blobbed on the page. I'm not sure you'd get as much of that with a sponge as you would with a paintbrush. So I got both sides. That really cuts down on any buckling. So I'm just kind of getting the rest of my paper done, and now we are good to go. So my paper is fully moist, and I'm just setting this aside right here for a minute while I mix up some color. So I'm going to show you way number 2. That is a great way to use a sponge. So I'm going to put some straight blue color on the top of my page here. Let's say that I wanted to do a sky or something like that, and I'm just keeping it very basic just for this video. And we can have that kind of spreading down toward the bottom. And I've got this nice blue wash. I'm going to rinse my brush and grab my sponge. I'm going to squeeze it out good. You can also use this to blot up. Now I'm going to use this sort of fuzzy edge first and see what that does. And you can kind of see it's picking up some of that paint, and it's very light. And you can see the paint that it's picked up there. I'm going to try a different side and be a little bit more heavy-handed. And it's still kind of a light effect. So what I'm doing is I'm blotting this on my paper towel to dry it out more. And you can get some nice soft effects. Just like that. And you can kind of see it's starting to come up, and you can see the paint that I'm blotting off, and it comes right off of this sponge. And it's just blotting off right to the side. Now I could even do some scrubbing or wiping like that. Blot. Do some more. And blot off the excess. And this is a lot different, and it's softer than using a paper towel. And let me show you. I ripped off a little corner of my paper towel here, and this will do a lot more of a scrub and leave a harder line. So if you wanted a very soft effect, you could go do that. And I'm going to give you a close-up here. You can see that light texture that it leaves on the paper. Okay, next up, let's do some sponge painting. So I'm going to get into this red just for demonstration and get it on my palette, and it's pretty thick and pigmented. I gave it a pretty good dip in my palette. So I'm just gonna dip this in my jar of water and swish it around for a second, and the paint just comes right off of it. So I've got it all off, and I'm gonna just dip it right in my paint, and you can see it on the fuzzy edge. And look at that. Look at how it goes down. And I can make it heavier in some areas by pressing repeatedly, but it just looks beautiful when it starts to spread out. I'm going to show this up close again with the camera. And this paper is very moist. Look at that beautiful color. I'm going to get another color on here. Let's do some darker colors. How about, you know what? I don't really ever do this, but I'm going to dip into my black today. Usually when I want a dark color, I stick with Payne's gray or something like that, but I think some black might be just the ticket. Now I'm going to dip my sponge again and give it a good squeeze and blot it off. And I'm going to pick up some of this black. And I'm just going to go lightly with it. And pick up some more. And if you want to have some different looks, you can twist your sponge around. You can use different sides of it. Like I'm going to pick up some more red with the other side here and put it right here on top of the black. You can also rub, so I can leave some smears and swirls like that. So I'm going to hold this up into the camera and let you see a close-up, and you can see the wonderful effect that the sponge has. I'm going to set this aside to dry, and then that way you can see it when it's fully dry. I'm going to do a couple of more things to show you some interesting things you can do. So I'm going to make two examples here, but first I'm just going to mix up some color real quick. And I'm just going to continue with this red, just like that. I'll continue with some more black. How about one of these oranges? Just like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is a couple things. So on here, I am going to wet a circle so you can see how the sponge paint spreads. So I'm going to do wet and wet here and spread some water on my paper first. So it will have a hard edge from the outline of my brush. And on this side, I am going to blot with my damp sponge. So it has a bit of a softer edge and a broken edge. And then we can see how those look too. So I'm going to start with the orange, let's say. And I'll start on my side with the brush outline and let that spread out. And then I'm going to grab some more and put it where I moistened with the sponge. All right. Next up, let's go for the red. And I'm just going to go right over my orange. And remember, both of these are wet and wet. and go into this black. And sponge painting just leaves the neatest textures. Whoops, I just dropped it and it rolled everywhere like a meatball. So you can kind of see, because it's wet and wet, the paint spreads out. But where you have the brush mark, it's not really going beyond that as you would expect. So if you're going to do wet and wet with a damp brush spreading water on your paper first, it would be good for something with a very defined shape. This is much more organic, so I'm still working wet and wet, it's still spreading out, but because I blotted with my sponge instead of my brush, it has a very uneven edge. And it won't have that sort of circular outline or the hard edge that you would see with the brush itself. So depending on the effect you want, you could get some really nice textures going on several different types of shapes. And sponges will lend themselves very well, I think, to landscape painting, especially if you're doing trees and tree leaves. And I did a tree and landscape painting not too far back, and I actually used my round brush for most of it. But you could easily do trees with a sponge. So I'm going to let these continue drying, and we are going to try a little landscape together in the meantime. All right, I'm back and I'm going to do this quick little painting. So I've pre-mixed some colors here. I've got kind of a reddish brown and a few different colors of green, and I just mixed them from my palette. I'm actually going to add a little bit more brown to this. I mixed some brown, some Payne's gray, and a little bit of red just to give it this nice, rich, sort of chocolatey color that's really beautiful. So I'm going to make a little bit of a tree trunk, and I'm just going to come in here and just do some demonstrations on what we can do with our sponges. I'm going to add some Payne's gray right in here, and let's do some tree limbs. And we'll just have some random ones kind of come out. And maybe I also want to do a little bit of yellow ochre on the ground. And let's just jump in with our sponge. So I've got a little bit of tree limb action going on, and I've got my yellow ochre down here. I'm going to dip my sponge into this dark color and add some texture down here. Maybe even put some around the tree, just like that. And I'm going to rinse my sponge in my water. And let's say we go for this light green color and make maybe a nice little shrub coming out here. And add in a little bit of this darker green. And I'm just kind of rounding out, changing the angle of my sponge because I don't want there to be like just a stamp, stamp, stamp. I want it to look different. So just keep that in mind if you're doing sponging. Just kind of move your hand around in different angles. And I'm going to come back in to this green. I'm going to do this darker green here. I'm going to start adding some leaves to this tree. Look how nice that starts to look. And I'm just kind of going through these branchy areas. Just like that. Rinse my sponge a little bit. And I'll come into this lighter green here Let's add a little bit of that color in there. And when I talk about sort of stamping, if I do the same mark, it's just going to always look the same, where if I vary it, then you can't really tell that it's the same part of the sponge. I'm going to add a little bit of this warm color in here. And maybe I'll mix up a little bit of this Payne's gray into this green, and I can add a little bit of shadow. Get it kind of dark and dip into that, and maybe put a little bit in to some of these bottom deeper areas. And I'm leaving some of the white coming through so that you can see that it's just sort of in daylight. Now I'm going to dip into this brown maybe and add in some more detail here for the ground. And mop up some more of this green and add some darker color to this bush. Just like that. And maybe I can come right into this yellow and this other sort of richer green. I accidentally dipped in the other green, but I actually don't hate it, so here we are. All right, now I'm going to come back into this dark and maybe add some more marks up this tree. And add in some more texture there, just like that. And so you could let this dry and add another layer. You could do anything you want, really, and you can combine your brush and your sponge, but I just wanted to do a quick little demo, and this just took a couple of minutes. And the other paintings are dry that we did together. So I've got this one. I will do the close-up. And let's get that into focus, and you can see that nice sponge texture on the tree, and it's really nice with foliage. You can just really have some fun with it and just play around and see how things look. Now you can see this dried completely, and look at that beautiful texture and color mix. And this would make a great background for another painting. But, and this is where I rubbed that paper towel. So you can see the difference, and this is kind of a harsher, you know, highlight, I guess, left by the paper towel. And then last but not least, this is that difference, and it's completely dry now, but this is where we did the wet on wet with the brush versus just wet on wet with blotting the wet sponge and then going back over it with paint. And you can see the dried color and the different effects you can get with that. So it looks like really nice texture. So I hope you enjoyed this video today, and you will pick up some sponges. You can even cut up some dish sponges, just anything you have on hand, and play around with it and have some fun with your paints. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel. And until next time, keep creating.